Hi everyone, this is review video number 5, and in this video we're going to be doing some examples on combining like terms and the distributive property. So let's start here with combining like terms. Now before we look at some problems, there's a few things I just want to make a couple notes on. So my directions say to simplify the following expressions by combining like terms. Now, I just want us to remember, right, in order to be like terms, we know that our term has to have the same variable raised to the same exponent. Okay, so if I have x squared, for example, that could be like terms with a negative 6x squared because they both have a variable of x and the exponent is the same. On the other hand, if I looked at something like maybe x and 3x squared, right, we know I'm going to put a red x through that. Those are not like terms because they don't have the same exponent. Okay, we also know that, I'm going to make a note, and sorry, I know there's not a lot of room, but I'm going to make a note that constants are always like terms as well. So any two numbers by themselves, so let's say 2 and negative 4, those would be like terms. Now the other thing that I want us to remember is when we're combining like terms, we're always doing addition or subtraction. So let's go ahead and do some examples. So my first one is 15 minus 11f plus f plus 15. So I always like to either underline, circle, highlight, whatever you like to do, but to mark my like terms before I start combining. So I notice that I have a 15 here, and I have another constant here. And notice I circled that plus sign with, because that's going to tell me what operation to do. So when I go to my calculator now, it's easy to see that I'm going to do 15 plus 15. So I'm going to type it in just how it looks. And so I get 30. So I've got 30. And then I see I've got a negative 11f. And again, that minus went with, so I remember to take account of that. And then I've got a plus f. Now here we have to remember if there's no coefficient, no number in front of that variable, we know that's going to be a 1. So now when I'm combining, I have to do a negative because I see that here. So I'm doing a negative 11 and then this was a plus 1. So I get minus 10 and the f goes with. So 30 minus 10f. Now it's important to realize if I had combined my f terms first, I would have had negative 11 plus 1. That would have given me a negative 10f, and a 15 plus 15 gives me a positive 30. So either of those two answers are fine. They mean the same thing. So that'll be something to watch out for when you do the multiple choice. If you don't see this answer, look and see if you find the terms just switched around. Okay, so now my second one. Again, I always just start kind of with the first term. So I see a 24x, and I see a minus 2x. So I know I have 24 minus 2, which is 22, and my x goes with. Now here's a case where we kind of called it that loner term here. We need to make sure we remember to bring that down for our final answer. So that'd be 22x plus 6. Again, you may see that as 6 plus 22x, but they mean the same thing since both terms are positive. Okay, so for my last one here, I'm going to do the same thing. I have a 9x. I have a plus 5x. So that means, again, when I go to my calculator, I'm doing 9 plus 14. For instance, I have a negative 72 plus 25. So negative 72 plus 25 is going to give me a negative, or putting a minus there, minus 47. Now again, it's possible you might see the terms flipped, but if you see that order switch, remember this minus has to stay with the 47, so it could look like this. The minus is still with the 47, my 14 is a positive, so I would see a plus sign there. So that's just a quick review of combining like terms. Now let's look at distributing. And now the important thing to remember is here is we were doing addition and subtraction when we were combining like terms. When we're distributing, now we're multiplying. And probably the most important thing is to remember we've drawn these arrows in class before, right? And that's to remind us that we need to multiply both of those terms that are in the parentheses. So when I draw this first arrow, it reminds me to do 5 times 4, which is 20. Now again, I see this negative x, so I know there's a negative 1 in front. So what I'm really doing is 5 times a negative 1. And now here's where I really don't want you to guess on these things. Make use of that calculator since you have it. So I have 5 times a negative 1, which gives me a negative 5. So I'm going to make sure I have a minus 5x. And that's all we need to do. So if you feel comfortable, it might be a good idea to just pause the video now, and then you can check when you unpause it. So here, if I distribute, I have 4 times 5 gives me 20. Now here, I have 4 times a negative 2. 4 times a negative 2 is going to give me a negative 8, and then the x goes with that term. Now this one might be a little bit tricky. Remember, there's just a minus sign out front, but really that's a negative 1 that's out front. So what I'm distributing is that negative 1. So I have a negative 1 times 12, which gives me a negative 12. And now here's where you need to be really careful. For my second term, I'm multiplying a negative 1 times a negative 8. So negative 1 times a negative 8 gives me a positive 8. So now this is going to be a plus 8x. Okay, for the last one, this one looks a little different because my constant now is on the right side instead of the left. But we still do the same thing. We're going to take that constant times the first term. So negative 3 times a 1 is a negative 3x. And then a negative 3 times a negative 7 is going to give us a positive 21. So the last thing we need to do here now are problems like these last three, where we have to distribute and combine like terms. And so the key here is that we always have to distribute first. We can't do any combining until those parentheses are gone, and that's what distributing allows us to do, is get rid of those parentheses. So we said distribute first. Now, when I'm distributing, I'm only distributing to the things that are inside the parentheses. So for now, I kind of pretend that this isn't there. So I'm going to do 4 times x gives me 4x. 4 times 3 is going to give me a positive 12. And then I'm going to bring down my minus 3. So we've done the distributing. Now we just need to combine our like terms, which are these two constant terms here. So I have a positive 12 and this minus 3. So my 4x comes down. It's kind of my loner. And I have 12 minus 3. Again, here's where we need to be careful with signs. 12 minus 3 gives me a positive 9. So I know I'm going to have a plus 9. Again, if you think you're pretty good with these, maybe go ahead and pause the video and then check. Okay, for the next one, again, I'm only distributing what's outside of the parentheses to what's inside. So for right now, I'm going to kind of disregard that 3x. I'm going to do 4 times a negative 1, which is going to give me a negative 4x. And then I have 4 times 6 is 24. Those were both positive, so I have a plus 24. And now I'm just going to bring down the 3x. So now I notice I have two x terms. I have 3x and I have a minus 4x. So again, be careful with those signs. 3 minus 4 is a negative 1. So I have negative x plus 24. Remember, this is the same as negative 1x. We just don't write the negative 1, and you won't see the negative 1 in the answer choices. So we just have to be really comfortable recognizing that this is the same as negative 1x. Okay, the last one we just need to do the distributing step twice. So here I'm going to distribute the 4 to the x and the 4 to the 2. So 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 2 is going to give me a positive 8. Now I'm going to deal with this. A positive 8 times x is going to give me plus 8x. And now 8 times a negative 1 is going to give me minus 8. And now we're just going to combine the like terms. So I have 4x plus 8x gives me 12x. And then something interesting is going to happen here. I have a positive 8, and then I'm subtracting 8. Well, if I do 8 minus 8, I just get 0. So I could write this, but since we're just adding nothing, the best answer, and one that you would see potentially in the multiple choice, would look like this. There wouldn't be that plus 0. Okay, so that's just a quick review of combining like terms and distributing. So now the best thing to do would be to turn the page. You have some practice multiple choice, and the answers are there in the packet for you as well. Good luck.